Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 44.
Oh, no. Oh, no, Ben.
What?
I didn't research anything for 44.
What are we? Okay, well, then I got something we can talk about instead. You're still alive, so you didn't die, because last time I talked to you, you're like attached to an EKG, and doctors didn't know what was wrong with you, and you were being cautiously optimistic, so what happened?
So, what happened? I am still alive, listeners. You'll all be thankful to know that I am still alive. I did make several medical appointments to see professionals to figure out what was wrong with me. And so I went to, I think I told this on the last one, is I went to urgent care and they didn't really know. And I went to the ER and they said I was fine. And I had a follow-up appointment after that.
Right. And then that's happened since the last time we recorded.
Yes. And so this follow-up was with my new primary care physician, which I'd never been to before. And so I go to this office. And the first thing that I loved about this place was that it was empty. I was the only person there. So that was nice. Big fan.
Wow.
I get in there. Oh, I'm here for my appointment. Here, fill out these papers. You fill out the papers. And as soon as I was done, like I was standing up to turn the papers in and they were calling me back into the waiting room. Oh, I'm a big fan of this too. I go back to the little patient seeing room. I sit down, I pull out my phone, and then the doctor came in.
The only thing I hate about that is still being handed papers. Like, please, can I just do this in advance on an iPad or something? Like,
it's interesting because urgent care, I was able to do them in advance on my phone, but I wasn't able to do them in advance for the doctor's office.
Yeah. I get that there's things they want to know when you show up so they don't like accidentally give you the wrong medication or miss some vital piece of information that just happened recently they should know about. But still handing you a clipboard with stuff to fill out on it, that feels so 20th century. Okay, so you got in really fast. You were the only person there. The doctor got you in.
Which was great. And so I was there and I was explaining what my symptoms and everything were and how I felt and what happened and how I was still at that moment feeling the extreme discomfort. And they're like, okay, well, nothing that you're talking about sounds anything to do with your heart. So let's take a look. And like they start feeling up my back and my ribs across my sternum and across my spine. And he goes, oh, okay. So I forget what the word was. It was osteopathic doctor. So he was explaining to me he's not a chiropractor. He's the doctor version of a chiropractor.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Well, apparently there are people that specialize in bones, and there's chiropractors, which is, and chiropractors, I'm sorry, I don't know anything about your profession, so don't at me. Apparently chiropractors are like the trade school version of a bone doctor, whereas then there's a doctor that then specializes in bones. So it's coming at the same specialization from two different directions.
I know there's orthopedic surgeons that deal with things, like marrow transplants and setting broken bones and stuff like that, but you're not talking about that.
No. I see orthopedic surgeons. They're my favorite kind of doctor. If you're an active individual and you have any kind of like sports injury or physically activity related injury, skip your primary care, go straight to osteopathic. Dang it, I forgot the surgeon that we were talking about, and that guy will take care of you. Okay. Anyway, this guy explains to me, I'm not a chiropractor. I'm the doctor version of a chiropractor, and it feels to me like you subluxed one of your ribs.
Subluxed?
So he was telling me that one of my ribs was popped out of the joint that holds it where it's supposed to be across my spine. And it was the one that goes right across the front over my heart. On that side.
A distractor. Yeah. That was an example of the logical fallacy we did last week.
Well, apparently it was popped out of my spine, and so it was out of place, which was then putting pressure on the chest wall right over my heart, which is why I was feeling my heartbeat so thoroughly, is because it was getting pressed up against it. And he goes, so if you don't mind, I can take you to another room, put you on a lower table, manipulate you a little bit, and you'll probably walk out of here feeling fine. And I was like, well, I don't know about that.
That sounds too good to be true.
Yeah, right. What am I going to say to that? Like, no, I don't believe in this snake oil nonsense. Like, yeah, of course. Now, it was a little weird because I've never been to a chiropractor before.
Okay.
Have you been to a chiropractor?
Yes.
Okay. So I had never been manipulated by another man in this way.
Yeah.
So he had me grip a pillow and cross my arms, and then he got really up in me, and like he's like cradling me like a child, and lifted my head with his hand and pressed my face into his chest. He's like, now just relax, and I'm going to roll you back. And I felt so safe until he started cracking all of my bones.
Yeah, so our logical fallacy last week was false cause, presuming that a real or perceived relationship between things means one is the cause of the other. So up to this point, you were assuming it was your heart. Your heart was hurting and your heart was the source of the pain, and that wasn't it at all.
Well, so...
That's good news.
Well, that is good news, and I do feel very much better. Like I can sleep well at night. Sitting in my chair isn't uncomfortable anymore. Just all the things. However, big asterisk on this note is now this week I decided, I told myself I'm well. There's nothing wrong with me. Let's get back into it. And so I went out to go running on Monday, like I do. And I got to the same spot in the run. And I felt it wasn't nearly as hard this time, but I still felt that kind of weird flutter in my heart, like enough that it was startling. And I stopped. And then I took it easy the rest of the run. I'm like, well, maybe it was just a one-time thing. And then I ran again on Wednesday. And in the same spot, it happened again.
What?
To a lesser extent. And then I ran again on Friday, and it happened in the same spot again. So I don't know what's going on.
But how did you dislocate your rib? Did you figure that out?
Oh, no, I have no idea. Right. It was probably when I went busting through a wall when somebody did the, hey, Kool-Aid thing. Like, I do that sometimes.
When I was a missionary.
It could have been that other time. I knocked down, there was a big wall, and I had to smash it with a sledgehammer the other week. Oh, I did have to flip a car at the Circle K. So maybe I did it when I was doing that.
There's a lot of things it could have been. When I was a missionary, there was this one missionary that, as the legend goes, he had to sneeze and he held it in and he cracked 3 ribs and he had to go get x-rayed and he was hurt for a while. And so then anytime we ever saw one of the other missionaries try to hold it in a sneeze, we'd be like, don't hold it in. You'll blow your arm off.
That missionary must have never drank a glass of milk in his whole life. He must have had the bone density of a sparrow. How do you crack ribs from a sneeze?
I don't think he had that osteogenesis imperfecta or anything like that. He just held in a sneeze and cracked 3 ribs.
Oh, he had that unbreakable disease where his bones were glass?
Nah. All right. Well, I'm glad you're okay. Are you embarrassed?
Embarrassed that I dislocated a rib? No, I thought that was pretty
No, cool. That you got an EKG for a dislocated rib.
Well, there is still something weird going on.
So you're not satisfied everything's okay.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. But I'm gonna try to. I'm thinking maybe I'm just out of shape, so I'm gonna keep with my physical routine and see if I can push through essentially. And then if it's still happening a couple weeks from now, then I'll follow up with somebody.
All right, I got a couple other follow-ups from last time. One is, so I told the story about how my wife's bend simulator had accurately predicted that I would be paranoid about the fact that she'd gotten the license plates for the new car and hadn't put them on.
Right.
There was a fact about that I deliberately omitted in retelling the story, and it really bothered her. So I have to issue an official retraction and an apology to my wife.
These are rare. We try not to do this.
I know, and I assumed that you knew this, but I just didn't say it explicitly, and she's upset because she thinks I made her look dumb. When you get a new car, it comes with temporary plates, and they last for a certain amount of time. And she was still within the period of the temporary plates that came with the car.
Right, and I assumed that.
Yeah, me too. But she wants me to point it out, so I'm pointing it out.
Alicia, we all know, but you still should have put the plates on the car if you knew it was going to make Ben mad.
In her mind, and I will give her that there's ways to think about this. In her mind, it was just, this thing has a deadline and the deadline hasn't come yet, so I can put off that work until later. In my mind, having the plates on the car is strictly superior to having a paper license plate in the window, as that poor Army lieutenant that's been all over the news this week can attest. Did you see that video?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Holy crap.
Yeah, apparently it can be threatening to your person.
He got pepper sprayed in his face. Because that happens. Because he had a valid temporary plate in the back window.
Yeah, so you're just trying to stop Alicia from getting pepper sprayed.
That's right.
That's you being a good husband. This is a win.
Well,
hang on a second. I got to get this out. The situation you're describing, where Alicia wants you to issue this retraction, not a retraction, just a clarification.
Yes.
This is a footnote to the conversation.
Footnote.
This is a classic scenario where, and it always happens with husbands and wives, where there's an argument and then there's a clear victor on one side, and so the other person starts grabbing for whatever asterisk they can put onto that victory. Yeah, you won, but I was still technically correct.
The best kind of correct. But I told this story from the perspective of me making a mistake. Like, she predicted accurately that I was going to get neurotic about something, and I did.
You say neurotic or erotic?
With an N.
Those are different. With an N, okay. And That's not when you told that story, that's not the take I took on it. I took your take where it's like, well, she should have put the plates on.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Alicia. I'm not siding against you. I'm not siding with Ben here. It's just, this is two guys talking.
Right.
If my wife was in the room, I would have a completely different take on this conversation. She's not. She's somewhere in the future, so I'll have to deal with her later.
Okay, so speaking of your wife being in the room, last time you predicted that you were going to get some things wrong in talking about the circumstances and events surrounding your marriage, and we had a long discussion about that. And you said that Nicole was going to take a drink for each thing you got wrong. So I want to know how blasted she got after she listened to episode 43.
Well, I will not divulge the exact number of things wrong that I got with the podcast. However, I will say that I had to physically carry her and put her to bed that night.
That is a great punchline to that story. And any in particular that you need to correct?
Specific dates. I tried to not say specific dates because
I know I forced your hand on one, but yes.
It's like history class. Like, I'm just not going to remember these dates, man. Just like, I get it. The Battle of Waterloo was important. Does it matter? Like, what if it happened in August or February?
I've been married for 10 or 11 years.
So, Ben, I have one tattoo on my body. Right? And I did that when I turned 30 because I wanted to do something dumb.
Wait. The tattoo on your body is the same as the shirt you're wearing.
Oh, I must really like this symbol that I have. This is not the only shirt I have with this symbol. I have probably 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
But the only other tattoo that I've...
For those of you that are wondering...
that would have been great speculation for the...
what's Josh's tattoo? I may edit that out. Okay, I'm considering it.
Just bleep it over.
I'll bleep it over, and we'll leave some speculation for the listeners.
And there's clues. Like, I have shirts of it. Okay. But anyway, I have the one tattoo, and the only other set of tattoos I've ever considered getting was list of dates for each of my fingers.
You did mention this on the podcast. You told that story.
Okay, good. Yes. Because
like
I don't
your
know
anniversary and each of those your important people's birthdays.
That's right. Because to this day, I still have to calculate my daughter's birthday from other numbers because I just don't remember it.
Yeah, the year part, not the month and day.
It's November 20th.
And then you got to figure out the year.
I'm fairly
6 years ago. 2015.
No, it was 14.
Oh,
yeah, it was 14.
Okay.
Definitely 14.
So she turned 7 this year. Okay.
Yes.
All right. We did it. I do that too.
Yeah, but you have to do it for Lord. I don't even know.
Yeah.
You have how many nieces and nephews and cousins and brothers?
It sucks every time that you gotta do Air Force paperwork and they have a form and you're supposed to fill in a line for each member of your family and there aren't even enough lines on the form.
You have to have that attachment that you staple to it. Start writing on the back.
Yeah, you're already setting yourself up for a bureaucracy failure where they forget to process the second sheet, and then your orders don't have all of your family members. Oh, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
All right, I'm going to throw this out there for the LDS community. Have y'all considered maybe just procreating during certain set months so all the birthdays line up?
There you go. Problem solved.
There you go. Only 2 months out of the year. The rest of the time is not on. And so then everybody's birthday is either in September or like February.
So speaking of the LDS community, and I didn't want to upstage you last time, but you told the story of the first time you told your wife you loved her, and it happened surrounding the circumstances of a friend of yours from your military unit who invited you to come help him move from one apartment to another, and how traumatic it was because when you got there, he hadn't packed anything, and then he ended up in a fight with his girlfriend, and you guys did all the work for him, and it was terrible. I didn't want to be like, I didn't want to be the one-upper story guy, so now I'm going to be the one-upper story guy.
I have a better version of that. Here it is.
Okay, so when you're a full-time missionary in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you are 2 18 to 21-year-old young men that are otherwise unemployed and unencumbered that are available anytime.
Okay.
And so you're frequently considered to be just like random free labor.
by who? By other missionaries? By the people running the church? Or just
by the local congregation, the local community. So we had things we did each week to volunteer for local community service. Like I volunteered at a library, I volunteered at an elementary school, I volunteered at an elderly, old folks home. I played bingo with the old folks. I taught little kids to read. I pulled stickers off of library book packages, whatever, did all that stuff. But in addition to all that, then there was like the one-offs. Hey, so-and-so's moving, he's not very well, he needs some help loading the truck. So I have helped someone move house dozens and dozens of times in my life.
And it's the worst. It
is. And the worst I ever had was close to what you're saying, but way worse. I mean, like the police were called and there was a hole in the wall. And I mean, it was a nightmare. You get there and nothing's packed, and they didn't even, you had boxes at least. They handed me a package of of garbage bags. Help us pack.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So the question I had for you was, you didn't say who this was. And in my mind, you may have told me at some point in the past who it actually was, probably someone I know. But I don't know who that person was. But what I wanted to ask you without revealing their identity is, does the fact that someone does something like that in their personal life exhibit in their professional life?
So because he's the kind of person that doesn't pack his house before a bunch of people come over, does that reflect? Is he the same kind of person professionally?
Yes. Or is that just completely separate? Like, would you not know from watching his professional life that if he asked you to come help him move, that you were going to show up and nothing was going to be packed and he was going to help?
This is interesting. I don't like anecdotal evidence because I think everybody's a little different that way. I think some people can be very, very organized professionally and just complete disasters personally.
Really?
I think so. That's a common thing you see in TV and movies all the time. So there's got to be some kind of truth to it. That came from somewhere. Maybe, but I just don't know. Like, this person was not in our unit. He worked, he was like a group exec or something. Like, I had met him through some other circumstances. Like, I didn't work with him side by side.
Okay, so I might not know him.
You might not. It was when I was in the 83rd.
Okay.
The other squadron. So you might not know him, first of all. And second of all, I didn't work close enough to him to be able to assess if he was or not. My gut says he wasn't, but that's because I think everybody was worse than I was when I was, in the military.
Don't we all? So, but I think that there's some things that would exhibit in your professional life. If you're the kind of person that just, because you talked about it, like how this is how you and Nicole bonded over the experience. You were kind of shocked and offended by the level of just lack of regard for other people's time and friendship because of being in that circumstance.
Yeah. Well, me and Nicole bonded over this because we're the same kind of borderline OCD neurotic. Like, both
Josh,
of us have.
No one likes showing up at that kind of move, and it's like, oh, this is great. More I can do to help. Even a bunch of Mormons.
Yeah. Flip the scenario. Like, if I had asked somebody to come help me move and I had not packed my boxes before they got there, I would be mortified.
Yes.
I would be.
You'd be apologetic.
Emotionally.
Yes.
I would apologize and send them home and pay for their meal and never ask them to help me again because I had screwed up that bad.
Yeah.
This person just rolled with it.
The last move I helped with as a 41-year-old man in my town that I live in now, we showed up at these people's house and they were getting evicted and their house was filthy and it wasn't packed. And I was the first one to get there. And I had to have this moment where I had planned to give away 2 hours of my personal time that day. And it didn't matter what I was doing. They could have given me, like, take this pencil and draw lines across this piece of paper for 2 hours. Like, I was still going to give up 2 hours of my day no matter what. So for me to be offended about what I was going to do with those 2 hours is kind of pointless.
I don't think that's true.
Like, if I showed up and they were perfectly packed and the truck was empty and we just started loading and it was all done in 2 hours, or if I spent the same 2 hours just packing a box, I was still helping for 2 hours.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like, the quality of work or the quantity of work wouldn't have changed. My argument is, if they're already packed, that shows respect for your time.
Yeah.
That shows, like, and I don't know, I am inherently uncomfortable with somebody.
But you're putting your ethic onto that person.
Yeah, I absolutely am. My ethic should be the line that everybody tries to live up to. But I don't. Here's my problem. I don't want you to hand me an empty box and push me into a room and say, hey, go through all of my nasty stuff.
Yeah.
and pack it into a box
and
try not to break any of it.
This last move I just was going through nasty stuff, and it was nasty. But you know what? I was helping myself. Like while I was doing this, at first I was starting to seethe. Like I was starting to feel anger and frustration and displacing on them. And I thought, you know what? I can just have this be a positive experience for me and a positive experience by them. And the only thing I have to change is my attitude about it. And I took a deep breath and I smiled and I did what I could to help. And when I left, I felt better as if I'd helped with a clean, easy, well-prepared move. And they were grateful to me for helping. And the only thing that changed was my attitude towards the work.
Interesting. Because I'm playing my own simulator of myself in this scenario, in your shoes. I've done the same thing. I'd have started working. I would have started seething. And then I would have realized, you know what? There's no reason I should feel this way. I would have put the box down, told them, you know what? I'm out of here. Bye. And I would have gotten like Taco Bell or something. And I've been perfectly happy about it.
Yeah. All right. Different strokes for different folks. So there's another correction/retraction I need to make for last time, and that is that I mentioned an idea, but I couldn't remember the name of it, and I like to do this the following time. So I mentioned the idea that when you're arguing with someone on the internet, and you and I had a really tense text exchange this week over this kind of thing. When you're arguing with someone on the internet, it's a lot easier for someone to come back with some nonsense than it is to disprove said nonsense. So on the internet, this is known as Brandolini's law, also known as the BS asymmetry principle, which is an internet adage that emphasizes the difficulty of debunking false, facetious, or otherwise misleading information.
Well, that's a common scientific thing. It is impossible to disprove something. So that's always the problem with arguments that you have.
You can't prove a negative.
Yeah, you can't, and you also can't disprove your feelings. But the problem is people will say stuff that they think is true, but they don't realize they don't have any basis for it. And when you ask, what are your sources? Show me your proof, show me your evidence. They see that as an attack, and then they just backfire effect, double down on the nonsense.
Well, the way I expressed it last time is the amount of energy needed to refute someone's nonsense is an order of magnitude larger than that to produce it, which is true. But I think we're tempted to engage in that order of magnitude because we want to elevate the discussion. Maybe if I respond with a well-intentioned or well-reasoned argument and cite my sources, they will respond in kind. No such luck. So I have an alternative strategy to propose. This is called Hitchin's razor. Hitchin's razor is the burden of proof regarding the truthfulness of a claim lies with the one who makes the claim.
Right. So that makes sense.
So instead of letting them do that to you, if they come back with some nonsense that's ridiculous, say, I made my case. Yours is in question until you prove it.
You'd be surprised how that won't work with the average person.
I know it wouldn't work. Here on the Bad at Magic podcast, we are trying to elevate ourselves and improve our understanding of the world around us, and frequently we'll introduce new vocabulary. I just introduced the idea of Brandolini's law and Hitchin's razor. And I realized that this podcast is in need of a glossary. So by the time this episode is published on the badatmagic.live website, I will have published a Bad at Magic glossary. So if you ever hear us say something on the show, you're not sure what it is, and it's not in the show notes, you can go to the badatmagic.live website and check out the Bad at Magic glossary and get a definition of the idea we're talking about.
Excellent. This is a very interesting thing that you have proposed, and I'm very curious about the logistics of it because this is the first I'm hearing of it. And last I checked, I'm the one that makes the website.
I have administrative rights on the website.
And don't mess up my menus, Ben. Don't you mess up my menus.
I've made changes to the website. You don't even, you know what? The fact that you don't know that I've made changes to the website means I've done it right.
Sneaky administration. I don't know if I like that.
Well, so I had another question I wanted to ask you because I know a while back you'd taken up a new hobby of lock picking, and I wanted to ask how that's going.
It's not.
No, you just got the thing, you picked it a few times, and that was it?
Yes. I successfully, I played with it enough that I could pick a standard lock, fairly consistently, and I could feel the differences in the pins and things.
Yeah.
And then I set it aside for a week, and then I picked it up, and when I sat with it for a couple minutes, and I was able to successfully pick the lock again, a handful of times. And Then I think the box got moved out of my line of sight, and I have not opened it since.
Got it. I could see this, in order for this hobby to go anywhere beyond the level you just did, where you've basically picked every lock in your house, is you'd have to start collecting locks. Like, that's the only way for this hobby to expand.
Well, Nicole
different types and styles, and that's expensive.
I should show you a picture of what she got me for as a gift, because it is a huge pile of different styles and different types of locks, and they're all very cool. What I need to
again, Nicole, you impressed me with your impressive lock gift-giving skills. Yes.
She has insanely good gift-giving skills. But what I need to do, honestly, if I want to be serious about this, is I need to put them in the room where I watch TV. Because that is a perfect idle thing to do with your hands.
Just keep your hands busy so that you're not
exactly
playing some nonsense game on your phone or whatever.
Yes. But hang on a second. Now that's a problem, because the nonsense game that I've been playing lately is Magic the Gathering Arena, because it's on mobile, Ben, and it's been on Android for, it has to have been like a year.
I'm not attracted to mobile, but what do you got to say about it?
Well, I was going to say that it was released, I think 2 weeks ago, for also on iPhone, the official release. Apparently I was part of the beta for this whole time. And so I told you offline that you needed to try it, because, come on, you're a Magic the Gathering aficionado. You have to have at least partaken in all of the forms of it in order to have an informed opinion. So did you download and try Magic the Gathering Arena for your phone?
I did not, nor do I intend to.
Ben, what?
Now,
justify your position.
My experience with Magic is that I like an online experience that meets the same level of experience of playing in person or exceeds it in the ways in which that is possible. And I know that I will just be disappointed playing on mobile, and I'm not interested.
Is it because you have a tiny phone?
Yes, that's one reason.
Well, get a bigger phone.
I'm not going to get a bigger phone just to play Magic. The same reason I'm not going to replace my perfectly fine working 26-inch monitors with a 31-inch widescreen monstrosity until my 26-inch dies.
I wouldn't go anything less than 34-inch for widescreen, but at the same token, like, I don't know. That just seems like such weird thinking to me.
But it's not just the size of the phone. It really is a compromised playing experience. When I play Magic the Gathering online, as fussy as the interface is, I don't feel like there's anything that I can imagine in my mind that I could do if I were playing with real cards that I can't accomplish on the game online. And I feel like that would easily be the case playing on mobile.
Well, now it's just a different experience, because you and I both know that there are things on the computer clients that are way worse than paper. For example, if you ever try to pull off an infinite loop combo against your opponent.
Sure. There's lots of shortcuts you can take in person that are legitimate within the rules of the game, but definitely faster than what a computer can do.
This is what I'm saying, is that you're already making some compromises, whether you realize it or not. And now moving to phone, yes, you make different compromises. That's all it is. You still get to play Magic. I'll tell you, 95% of the time, it's not a problem. You feel like you're playing normal Magic. When you're trying to pull off really intricate and really complicated plays, they become tedious and almost impossible on the phone. I will say that. Yeah,
I'm not interested in that. I'm so uninterested in that, I'm just avoiding it altogether.
But you just play spiky aggro decks anyway. Like, you're not doing anything complicated.
I'm not doing it. Not doing it.
But this is all right. Everybody hear that? That's Ben being an old man. It's like, these young whippersnappers and their mobile interfaces. I'm just not going. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe someday soon I'll be able to do it by putting on an Oculus headset and actually holding my hand out in front of me with virtual cards in it. I'm interested in that.
And you see, I'm not. I have absolutely no desire to have a virtual reality card playing experience if I can't tactically feel the cards in my fingers.
But that would give me the chance to get back something I've sacrificed by playing online, and that is the interpersonal interaction. If I could go into a virtual room and play against a virtual opponent that's sitting across from me, and I could speak and they could hear me, and a table is in front of us, but it would be enhanced, like every card would be perfectly illuminated, and I would never be able to do something that was illegal against the rules. It sounds great.
That would be objectively worse, because that allows the opponent to hide behind the anonymity of the internet and just be that standard troll that you hear about playing all these online games, screaming about what they're going to do to your nearest female relatives and whatnot.
Well, that's debatable whether that's a bad part of playing But
do you smack talk when you play video games? Do you smack talk like that, Ben?
No, I don't talk about people's mothers. But okay, so there was this experience. Even when you play in real life, you're still going to have stuff that can't happen when you play online. That's one of the things I like about playing online. Other than legitimate bugs or accidentally skipping your turn or something like that, for the most part, it's like having a level 1 judge or level 5, I forget which is better,
5,
hovering over you and making sure neither of you makes any mistakes according to the rules of the game. When I was in day 2 of Grand Prix New Jersey and I was playing against Reed Duke, I made an illegal play. I played a land that comes into play tapped, and I played it untapped, and then I tapped it and cast a spell. And we both realized that I'd made a mistake. And then we called the judge, and they had to come figure out if I was trying to cheat and make a determination and figure out how to rewind the game state. And it was embarrassing and ridiculous.
Yeah, well, this is the Bad at Magic podcast, and that's what spawned this podcast. Was I was with you in Vegas watching you play a game and calling out all of your mistakes.
Yeah, that was bad.
You just need to be a level 1 judge, Ben. Just learn the rules better and stop breaking them.
But there's a win condition you have online that does not exist in real life.
And what's that?
It's the addition of the chess timer.
Well, now that's not true because any tournament you've ever been to has a chess timer.
No, that is not true.
Well, not a chess timer.
Calling a judge
timer.
and saying, yes, there is a round timer, but the round timer it can be manipulated by the slower player. But online, playing slow is only bad for the slower player.
Well, just bring a chess timer with you the next time.
No, you can't do that. You can't.
You totally could.
No,
totally
you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. You cannot.
No, you can't. You can.
How many?
And then you can.
Josh, how many times in a match does priority switch?
No, that's true. A ton of times.
Thousands.
Probably 100 times a turn. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it would just turn into a dispute over who actually had priority. You can't do it. You can only do that with a computer. So I sent you an article about it was like a Ask Constance what's it called, protocol manners kind of column where someone said, hey, my family and I have decided to raise our child as an atheist, and they have a little friend who's Mormon, and he keeps trying to get my child to believe in Jesus, and I don't like it. What do I do?
Yes, I did read that article, and I found it very interesting. And their response was a little more militant, a little more hardcore than probably my response would have been in this circumstance. So anyway, it was the parent of the agnostic/atheist household trying to ask this columnist for how do I approach this problem.
Right.
And the columnist recommended speaking to the parents, but at the same time mentioned that that kid is in your house. You have every right to correct their behavior while they're in your house. And I don't know if I agree with that, because there is correcting behavior, and then there is questioning their fundamental beliefs and judgments. And like, here's the thing. Do unto others, right? So, like, listen, little kid, don't be talking to my son about all your churchy nonsense while you're in my house. Okay, well, then you need to be prepared when your kid goes over to their house and he has them sit down, or that family has them sit down and join in with all of the Bible study and all of the prayers and everything. Because that's the standard that you just set.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, I think that the person who was asking the question was turning it into more of a crisis than it needed to be. But
well, it can be difficult. I will tell you this right now. My wife is a spiritual person, and she went to church all her young life, and like I explored it in college and did that whole thing, but I was too late to the party, and so I was already set in my ways or whatever. But like the idea of introducing this to our children is one of the few contentious points that we have in our relationship, because I don't want an authority figure to tell my kids about religion and things that may or may not be true, or are beliefs that you have to like adopt, because my kids don't know any better. If somebody in an authority position tells my son all of these things, he's going to believe them because he's 9, and that's what 9-year-olds do. At the same time, like, there's no good answer to when are they old enough to be able to go into this conversation with enough skepticism but still be open to it. Like, I have no idea.
So one of the reasons I sent you this article is when I read it, I imagined myself as the parent of the Mormon child who is proselyting to their friend, just like we teach them to do. And you probably imagined yourself as the other parent. So I thought it would be an interesting discussion for us coming from both sides of this. And you asked me kind of pointedly, like, so what would you do?
Well, what would you do if the scenario was reversed, is what I asked you. Is if a little secularist kid came into your house and was like, all of this is not true, and I can't believe you guys all think this.
So I think I told you that we do have this situation come up sometimes, and we have a very static family approach to it. And that is later, when it won't be in front of the other kid and embarrass him, we say, this is an example of someone who believes differently than we do. And we can love them and respect them, and they can still be our friends.
Yeah, and I think that's almost not quite verbatim what I would have told my kid after the other kid left. I think the only difference is I probably would have said it in front of the other kid in just a non-confrontational way. It's like, that's what you believe, and we believe something different. That's all.
Yeah.
Now go play tag and stop talking about the rapture or whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad we brought that up. So I have this giant yellow bruise on my arm. It's you can barely cover it with a dollar bill. I don't know if I told you this, but I got the Janssen vaccine for COVID-19 this week.
Oh, okay.
So,
hooray! Congratulations. Aren't you already immune because you've had it like 4 times?
Yes, but you know what the benefit of this was, other than getting 2 days of symptoms and a giant bruise? I have a little piece of paper now, because no one was going to listen to me if I said, yeah, I've already had this disease. But now that I have this little piece of paper with the government stamp of approval on it that says I've gotten the vaccine, now I have a leg to stand on.
Ben, you sound so facetious when you say that, without realizing that you have at least 5 other versions of that exact piece of paper in your wallet that you don't question at all.
I know.
You have a driver's license. Listen, I'm old enough.
That doesn't mean I'm good at driving.
Well, yeah, but I know what you're saying. But not having a driver's license, like, oh, I'm old enough to drive a car, that's not an excuse. That's not good enough to drive a car. You have to have the piece of paper that says you drive a car. I'm going to fly to another country. I'm a citizen of the United States. Let me in from Mexico. Well, unless you have a little piece of paper that says U.S. passport with this person's name on it, you're not a citizen.
So let me ask you a question then, as if this were the same kind of thing. Does or does not contracting the disease itself and then recovering from it constitute the same biological process as getting a vaccine?
I'm not a microbiologist. Like I'm not a.
Why is a medically
pathologist.
Administered vaccine strictly superior to my body contracting and defeating it naturally?
I'm going to fall back on Hitchin's razor, and Ben, you provide information to me that says you are just as immune.
That's why I voluntarily went to the FEMA site and got the stupid shot.
I'm actually going to get the stupid shot tomorrow morning. As we are recording this podcast, it is, Saturday night. I have to get up at 0:30 tomorrow to drive to a public site and drive through some big building in a warehouse to have the shot administered to me.
So the Janssen one, also known as the Johnson & Johnson one, it has had a lot of controversy swirling it. There was one of the production sites that had questions regarding contamination, and so they halted production for a while. And there was this slight window that opened up where they were offering it, and they didn't have enough people show up, so they opened the availability of it, and I rushed down there and got it. And then within a week, they'd closed it off again because there'd been scattered reports of people getting blood clots following that vaccine. And now they're not allowing it around here. So I got it during like just 1 week window. And the reason I wanted that one was because I did not want to get the 2-part series after already having had it, because I knew I would get the symptoms both times I got the 2-parter.
Oh, and we all know how much Ben Rich hates getting shots for things he thinks he doesn't need.
Yeah, I hate that. So, and now they're starting to say, oh, if you got the AstraZeneca one, or I can't remember, the Pfizer one, you actually might need a 3rd booster of it. So screw that.
Ben, I'm just going to get whatever shots the government tells me to get. You're coming at me like kind of confrontational. Like I don't care. I'm just going to do what I'm told.
But your decision isn't based on doing what you think the government wants you to do. You're making a risk decision based on what you think will actually protect you and your family. So why are you going to go do this on Monday morning?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning.
I'm doing this tomorrow morning because it will decrease the chances that I bring it back to my house where my high-risk son is.
Okay.
And he can't get it.
Well, what does that have to do with the government?
I'm contributing to herd immunity.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yes. It is exactly what you're doing. So why were you giving me a hard time about complying with what the government says?
Because you were making a big deal about, oh, I've got the fancy piece of paper now. Yes, Ben, you do have the fancy piece of paper. The paper is important. That's my point.
Yeah, I agree with you. Because so many times in my life I've run afoul of not having the piece of paper. I understand the value of that. I don't think it's legitimate, but I...
Yeah, you see, your words are saying that you agree with it, but your tone at the beginning of this said that you really didn't care for it. Anyway, I'm gonna stop you right here, and we're gonna go down a tangent because I don't know how many episodes ago this was that I called this, and I want to bring it back. Ben Rich, you, sir, are coming up on the end of your deployment to Florida. Yes?
Yes.
Well, you're there for another week or so, correct?
6 days.
Fantastic. I remember that you flew off the handle so hard that you sounded like me for one episode when you were talking about having to get the anthrax vaccine.
I totally did. I was so pissed.
And you talked about you were going to draw the flaming sword and you were going to stomp around base at CENTCOM and you were going to get the deployment orders for your position changed so the next guy would not have to do it. And you swore that you were going to get this done. Ben Rich, I'm asking you now, did you actually take the time to get the orders changed?
I was unsuccessful.
I told you. I don't remember my exact words.
You're right.
It was
if you were
about,
looking for I was right, you get it. You were right.
Yep. Did you run into that big wall of bureaucracy?
I totally did.
And it chewed you up and spit you back out without caring about you, didn't it?
Yep. So,
sorry, Ben. I've died on that hill. I know what it looks like.
So much for that. I didn't consume any like gimmies, you know. I didn't hurt anything. I just was unsuccessful.
Oh, but you did try.
A little piece of me died.
That can't possibly be true. If the little piece of you died every time you failed to change the federal government, like we'd all be
That's a good transition. So on a personal level and nothing having to do with the government, I had this horror happen this week that was outside of the realm of things I thought were possible, and I did not tell you about it, and I want to tell you about it now. So I was hungry on, I don't know, like Thursday night. I thought, I'd really like an omelet and some pancakes. So I went on DoorDash and I ordered IHOP, which is far enough away that I didn't want to go get it myself. I was happy to pay the extra, $6 for somebody to drop it off at my room. And the way that they do this in a hotel is they just carry it up to the door. They snap a photo with their phone. They knock on the door. And by the time you open the door, they're already gone. So it's just like this mysterious food shows up in the hallway outside your room.
That sounds stressful. I'd eat random food that shows up outside my room.
Yeah. Well, that's where this story's going. So I hear the knock and I open the door and they're already gone. And I look down and this is, my brain goes, that's not right.
Okay.
It was one of the kind of bags you get when you order Chinese food from like the like low cost Chinese food place in the corner that says like, thank you in red ink on a white bag.
Yeah, just the generic bags that you buy off of Amazon.
Yeah, and I picked it up and I could feel that it had like those clamshell styrofoam containers in it. This is not the first time I've ordered from IHOP, and neither of those things are true. So my brain's already going, did IHOP run out of their own name-branded bags with the nice big blue logo and the nice thick gauge plastic and the clamshell cases, the clear top, black bottom things inside?
This is another difference between you and I, because the second I saw that bag, like, this is the wrong food. But you are already like looking for ways to justify, like, oh, maybe this is the right thing and they did the right thing and it's just my perception is wrong. Yeah.
Okay, so I brought it in. I untied the bag, which somebody had stupid double tied. So I'm like fussing with the plastic. I'm thinking they're in the parking lot and they're driving away and this is bad. So I open up the bag and I get out one of the clamshell cases and there's like a container, like a round container of sauce in the bag, which has nothing to do with what I've ordered. And I open it up.
Was it red sauce? Was it sweet and sour sauce, Ben?
I open it up, and this is used. There were chicken bones inside of this thing.
Used food is what you got?
I got used food. There was a little bit of like leftover rice that looked like really low rent fried rice, and chicken bones inside of this thing.
Okay.
And I'm just searching my memory, like, how on earth did this happen? How did the person go to IHOP to pick up my order that had my address and my name on it, drive the 5 miles to get to my hotel, come upstairs, and give me a bag of used Chinese food?
Oh, Ben, you poor naive fool. Like,
what?
This is 100% intentional.
What's in it for them to have a job and do it wrong? Like, what's in it for them?
They got to eat
Tell
your
me.
food.
No. Why? How does that not come back on them in any universe? That doesn't make any sense.
Did you get paid?
So I got a text when they dropped it at the door that was the photo of the wrong bag sitting outside the door. And I saw what number the text was from, so I pulled up the text and I hit dial on the number, and a girl answered that I think it was a girl's name that said it was a driver for my order. I'm like, hey, you dropped off the wrong food at my apartment and at my hotel room. And she goes, oh, sorry, I'll bring up the right one. And then within 1 minute, I heard the knock at the door. I was waiting right by, and I opened it, and she was already gone, and it was the right food. Oh, I forgot to mention, I put the old food outside the door, and she took it with her.
Interesting. So she was just trying to steal from you.
I don't know what. Okay,
she was trying to steal from you.
That's the story you told to yourself. I did the like Indiana Jones switching the idol on the thing. Like maybe just. Okay, here's what scene I remembered in my mind. You know, in the movie Minority Report, when he gets the eyeball transplant, and the like dodgy doctor that actually did a pretty good job of transplanting his eyeballs said, hey, when you get up, there's a sandwich in the fridge and some milk for you. And for some reason, I don't know, movie reason, there was a beautiful, freshly made sandwich sitting right next to a moldy, nasty old sandwich. And he goes
because it was presumably the previous patient also had a sandwich made for him, and the guy couldn't be bothered to get rid of the old one.
Right. So he goes to the fridge and he's fumbling around with his hand, and he reaches and almost touches the nice fresh sandwich and then accidentally grabs the moldy, nasty old one. I don't know. Maybe in her car she just does this. So I don't know. I couldn't figure it out, but I was imagining that she reached for my bag, accidentally grabbed the wrong one, and somehow still had my room number. Okay, my room number was on the outside of the right bag. It was not on the outside of the wrong bag, but maybe she used the app. I don't know. She screwed it up, brought used food to my room, and I called her and she fixed it. What?
In my mind, the only explanation for this situation is either malice or incompetence.
I was going with incompetence.
Okay, I lean towards malice because I think the universe is out to get me.
So you think that they were hoping to give me a box of chicken bones and that I would be satisfied with it and not call their company on them and report them?
Or they were hoping that they'd leave it there. You weren't sitting in your room at the time. Maybe you were coming back from somewhere else, and then the statute of limitations expired on it.
Huh.
How long do you have to say this is the wrong food?
30 minutes until then you have to escalate past the person that actually delivered it.
Hey, see, there you go. Maybe she thought that she'd get away with the 30 minutes. Maybe it's just a gambit that she does all the time, and if you get 1 or 2 meals out of it, hooray!
Well, then I shouldn't have given her box of used food back so that she has a fresh decoy. Okay, so I had the food, and then it was sitting there in front of me at the table, and I'm staring at it, and I realized that now my universe has been disrupted. Like before, I thought of the middle person in this transaction as a proxy, a null proxy.
Oh no, these are people that are going to milk the system and get every scrap of utility out of it they possibly can.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like if you're at a fast food restaurant and you order it and they pass it across the counter to you, I just imagine there was one extra person in the middle there that was passing it, and that's all they were doing, is just passing it. It's almost like they don't exist.
I get that. You were abstracting that person away as if they were part of the black box that just makes your food.
Now I'm broken. Like I can't do that anymore. I can't order someone else from Uber Eats or DoorDash or Postmates to bring me food and still abstract them away.
I have seen too many YouTube videos of a DoorDash person coming up with a bag, setting it on the door, taking a picture of it, and then picking it up and then walking back off. I will never order from those services because you cannot trust the people that do it.
Yeah,
and well, 99%
I trusted them until
fine.
this week when this happened.
Well, most of the people out there are probably just doing the best they can, but there's those handful of people like this that are going to ruin it for not just you, not just me, but every one of our listeners.
Well, if someone from DoorDash is listening, I want you to know that I'm not I didn't. So I don't know what you told yourself in your head, but I didn't do anything else after this. I didn't report it. I didn't hit I didn't like give her a 1-star rating on the app or anything like that. I just brushed it off. I got my food, whatever. Like
my brother-in-law works for DoorDash, like
does
at
he?
the corporate office.
Yeah. Wow. Tell him this story because I will never use that service ever again and they won't know. Like I didn't report it. I didn't give him 1 star. I'm just like, this took and broke that middle person that I had abstracted away and it turned them into a potentially malicious force in my life and I will not expose myself to that anymore.
I don't speak for the DoorDash corporate office and I don't talk to him about his work. So this is not their take on it. But my understanding of how just business works, you just eat that as a cost. Like you are one dissatisfied customer and maybe you have a sphere of influence. Maybe you don't. You probably don't. There's way more people that are using the service than people that are being, disenfranchised by it.
Yeah, I get that. But I also think that there are those people that that's the reason they have the little part of the app where you put in a rating after the transaction so they can track it and measure it and maybe potentially do something about it. But I'm a ghost. Like, I didn't want to give her a bad rating because she still delivered my food, but I was very, very dissatisfied with that outcome. So dissatisfied with that outcome. So incredibly dissatisfied with that outcome. I'm broken now. The internet does something weird. When the internet was new, it started to do something they call disintermediation. Do you know what disintermediation is?
I could guess from the word, but I'm going to say no just so you can explain it.
Okay. It means taking a middleman out of the equation. Like we kind of got this with like Costco and Sam's Club where you could just go and buy in bulk and cut out stores and save a little bit of money by doing some extra work yourself. Well,
why buy 1 jar of peanut butter when you can buy 5 gallons and save 10 cents on the unit?
Exactly. And that's a ridiculous example. A much more reasonable example would be like a travel agent or a stockbroker, somebody of questionable value added that once you had access to the services and the information yourself on the internet, they started to lose their jobs.
Right.
They didn't have a monopoly over control over it, and the internet helped you to disintermediate and just cut those people out of the equation. And I don't know, how much value a travel agent adds or a stockbroker adds, or as the example was given in Freakonomics, a pimp or a real estate agent. Those two apparently have pretty good value. But the internet was disintermediating. And now we have this situation with food delivery services where we're re-intermediating and we're putting someone into a transaction that didn't previously exist.
Well, it's the gig economy, Ben. Like, get with the times. This is what these hip millennials are doing.
I'd already accepted it with like pizza delivery. Like, do you still order pizza?
I always pick up my pizza.
Huh. Okay. I don't know. I always thought, I kind of thought of it the same as pizza delivery, but now I don't. I can't.
You are literally like personifying the meme that is, 2001 when your parents tell you don't get in cars with strangers. And now we flash forward to 2021. You literally summon strangers to get in their car with your phone.
Yeah. Thanks, Uber and Lyft. Let's do our Bad at Logic segment. And
Bad at Logic. I have picked the bias today because apparently I am the biased one. Haha. The bias that we're talking about today is the negativity bias. This is where you allow negative things to disproportionately influence your thinking. So right. I like this bias because I suffer from this bias.
And I told you I don't, and then I gave you an example where I do.
There you go. I every bad thing that happens to me, Ben, I carry that sucker around with me, and it is just this long list of evidence in ways that the universe has screwed me over, and I bring them up every chance I get to say, this is how I will get screwed over this time. Yeah,
that's why you don't let them tell you to pull forward in the fast food in the drive-through line at a fast food restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, sir, can you please pull forward? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to talk to you for 45 minutes about the 14 different situations where negative things have happened to me because of something that you're asking me to do.
Well,
but how do you not live that way, Ben? How do you live in this happier place that you do?
Well, you're talking me down, Josh. I realize maybe I overreacted and I should give DoorDash another chance.
That's the exact opposite of what I'm going for here.
Because I let go of the pain and the disappointment and the breakdown of whatever it was occurred. Just like you pointed out, as I was telling that story, you were looking for ways to excuse this person's behavior as something other than maliciousness. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe they didn't do it on purpose. Those kinds of things. That's how I get over the negativity bias. I tell myself the good story about that other person's behavior, something that explains it in a way that isn't just them being mean or trying to victimize me.
I mean, intellectually, I can understand that, but emotionally, it makes no sense because people are terrible. People are just rotten to the core, all across the spectrum.
Are you terrible? Are you rotten to the core?
Yeah. Yes, Ben, I am.
No, you aren't. And if you were the one delivering the food and you'd made the mistake and put the wrong bag on the doorstep, I guess you would be okay with them assuming that you were trying to steal their food. But that doesn't make as much sense. It's just the Occam's razor. They accidentally put the wrong bag up.
I want to make this perfectly clear right now, Ben. I would never make that kind of mistake at such a low-level task. Throwing it out there. Just gonna... Like, yes, universe can punish me by making me screw something simple up later in the future. I'm still going to say it. If I was a DoorDash employee and that was my job, like, that's the thing. Is like, you just want to slap this person, grab them by the collar, like, this is your job. You are doing this to earn money.
I did want to show her I did want to hold up the two things side by side and say, look at this. This has my name on it. It has my room number on it, and it's in the right bag of the place you picked it up to bring it for me. This one has none of that stuff, and it has chicken bones inside. How did you mess this up?
I know nothing about the processes for quality control in your business, but I'm guessing you had to break at least 4 of them in order to give me this pile of garbage that you tried to pass off as my meal.
Yeah. I don't know.
Maliciousness. It could only be maliciousness.
Okay, but you're defending this one. Last week, the bias, or 2 episodes ago, the bias was something else, and you were like, yeah, this is a terrible one. No one should ever do this. It was the backfire effect. This one you're kind of defending as being legitimate, but isn't it still a bias that causes us to make bad decisions? The negativity bias?
No. Now, hang on a second. Just because these are biases doesn't mean they affect your thinking negatively. Doesn't mean it's always factually worse.
Okay.
So the negativity bias, so this is a slight tangent. I like to think of myself as a realist. My brother will point out that's what pessimists call themselves. That's fine. I will take either of those titles gladly. Here's the thing, is if this is, the negativity bias is me setting a low bar for everything that happens in my entire life. And so I can only ever be happily surprised, Ben. It's like, they didn't spit on my pizza today. That's outstanding.
The key word in this definition that makes it a bias and not just a frame of reference is the word disproportionately. You know, it's like in the meme book, he gave the example of shark attacks. One shark attack occurs and then it goes into the headlines and then people don't go to the beach. But it's a disproportionate effect that it has on people's behavior.
Okay. So I'm trying to think, like, this is, again, the problem with having biases is you're unable to really filter it out when you're talking about your own thinking. Right. Because I'm over here and confident when I say, I don't think my negativity bias affects my decision making, when obviously it must all the time. I just can't think of any instances where my thinking would have been different because I can't filter out my own bias.
So after having this bad experience with DoorDash, then I was like, okay, I'm never doing this again because that was terrible. But let's see, since I've been here, I don't know, that was like the 10th time I'd used DoorDash. And the other 9 experiences were uneventful.
Oh, so that's the negativity bias in play, because 10% of the time it goes wrong, but the other 90% there's no problem.
Right.
That's a pretty good return on investment for $6.
Right. So should I be willing to just go back to it because to not make my the effect of that 10% bad experience disproportionate?
Well, I think what this does is it illustrates the floor. Like, that is probably the second worst experience that you can have with DoorDash and get through it. I think the first worst is, a home invasion where they murder you in your hotel room. But
I'm not Googling that.
So, all right, listeners, this is just a life hack from Josh's perspective. If you're always thinking about worst case scenarios, the worst case scenario is always that you will be murdered. Always. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Like, that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah. All right, there's one other thing you and I were starting to argue about in real life, and you were like, hang on, let's not argue about this in real life. Let's argue about it on the podcast.
Well, I don't remember what that was.
You wrote it in the notes, not me.
Oh, did I? Let me see.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, the age-old debate. Like, we are finally getting to the nitty-gritty, the important questions, Ben.
All right, let's ask the important questions here.
All right,
you're going to be the proxy for my wife, and I'm going to be me. I don't know who you argue this with.
I'm not going to be a proxy for nobody. I'm going to be me in this conversation. So we were on a Skype call, or we were doing something, and I could see you. And you, sir, blew your nose And as you were blowing your nose made the distinctive honking noise that only happens when you blow so hard that your nostrils vibrate and makes that trumpeting noise. I went to band class in middle school. I know how sound is generated. And then we had the discussion, why do you honk when you blow your nose? That's unnecessary. This is my stance. Honking when you blow your nose is unnecessary.
Okay, do you think it's also rude?
No, I don't think it's rude. I think it's unnecessary. So why do you do it? It might be slightly obnoxious. I can't have a polite conversation while you're blowing your nose in the other room.
Okay, to me this is scientific, very scientific. Like
scientific?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're pro honking.
I have a control
obviously.
group and I have an experimental group. I can blow my nose without honking and then blow my nose with honking and find that one is more effective than the other and therefore determine that honking is superior to not honking.
Hang on a second.
Easily scientific.
Take your scientific air quotes evidence and just throw it right out the window.
You can't honk, can you? You're jealous.
Did you have exactly the same amount of nose mucus and blockage in your nasal passages at the time that you honked and did not honk? Did you honk or did you blow the same pressure both times? This is the thing. Honkers will swear up and down that the reason they honk is because they blow harder while they're honking. I'll tell you right now, I can honk my nose and I choose not to. And all it takes is putting my finger against the side of my nostril so it doesn't vibrate as I'm blowing the increased pressure through it. It just stops the vibration. It doesn't stop the pressure, Ben.
I'm almost going to pull Hitchin's razor on you here and say you should have to prove that honking is inferior. But I'm going to tell you why I think that it is.
Okay. Why is honking superior to non-honking?
So let's say you could set up something that wasn't quite so biological and different, because your anatomy is potentially different than mine. People have different shaped noses and different pressures they're able to exert with their diaphragm and their lung capacity and all these kinds of things. And there could be inflammation and lots of variables. But let's just say you could set up a scientific experiment where you had like a passageway that was like not even biological, and it had some type of mucus inside of it and that was approximate representative in how adherent it was to the sides of the passage, and then you could blow air down the passage and see how much of the fluid that adheres to the inside and sides of the passage you could get out by blowing alone or by blowing and also vibrating.
All right, if anybody from the Discovery Channel is listening, this sounds like a Mythbusters reunion episode.
This feels like a no-brainer to me, Josh. Blowing and also vibrating is strictly superior to just blowing and no vibrating.
You are assuming that the vibration occurs throughout your entire nasal passage, which is not true. The vibration only happens at the discharge point, right at the end. Right at the end is where the vibration is.
That's not possible. It vibrates your whole freaking head.
It does
you
not.
Want to know? You want to know how I know that right now? Audience, listen now. I'm going to tap the back of my head, and you'll notice that it causes the microphone on the front of my mouth to vibrate. That will appear distinctly in the recording. That was on the back of my head, Josh. We're talking about 2 centimeters difference in your nose. Of course, the honking makes your whole nose vibrate.
It's unnecessary. It is unnecessary. You can blow your nose successfully and remove all of the discharge and nastiness without having to make an obnoxious noise while you're doing it.
I honk because it does it better, faster.
Man, this is...
Here's why this has been a point of contention in our marriage. I will pick up a tissue, honk twice, and be completely clean, and my wife will go through 4 tissues, blowing, and it lasts like a minute and a half. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just blow harder. It'll make the honking sound, but you'll be done already.
I don't think it's polite of you at all to be mouthing your wife's diaphragm strength on the podcast, Ben. Alicia, I'm sorry for this.
That's why I told you were going to be a proxy for her, because we have this argument. I stopped arguing with her about it. I just decided that I love her more than the sound of her blowing in your nose. So
the difference between you and your wife, there's too many variables there. I'm not going to defend how she blows her nose. If she's going to, maybe she wants to be more thorough than you, Ben. You ever think of that? Maybe as a man, you just care about the cinder block that's completely obstructing one nostril, when she wants a completely crystal clean, smooth nasal passage all the way back. Maybe that's the case. You don't know. You don't know what her nose feels like.
What really is the objective of blowing your nose anyway? You have a beginning state and an end state, and as long as you're satisfied at the end state, then how you got from one to the other doesn't really matter.
Yes, because one is obnoxious and affects the people around you, and the other one is polite.
All right, we talked about this in a different way before we started, but my dad is definitely a honker.
That sounds dirty, but okay. Is that, so are you trying to be more like your dad? You trying to?
I don't know.
Keep his methods going.
I grew up listening to my dad honk, and so I think it's right, and I defend it.
My dad is a honker, and my brother is a honker, and I feel like there's a better way. And I maybe I'm just here spreading the good word that you don't need to honk. I don't think it's necessary.
We're starting to sound like an episode of Seinfeld. There were chicken bones in the bag. Chicken bones, Jerry.
We can only aspire to that level.
Time for Bad at English. And for this one, I'm going to talk about culture without really talking about a word in particular. So one time I'd gone down to London with a friend of mine, and there was a brand new pair of Nike shoes that were really hot. I loved them. They were these gray knitted with like this bright red sole, and I loved them. And we had unit PT on the base that I worked at in Corsham, and I showed it to PT, and I didn't realize it, but I was wearing these brand new shiny Nike shoes. I was wearing Nike shorts and had on a Nike shirt. And I walked in, and the guys were kind of waiting around for PT to start, and it got kind of quiet, and they all stared at me, and one guy piped up and goes, "Sponsored by Nike."
Okay.
And I kind of, I own non-Nike athletic apparel, but I was looking around at these guys and realized that it was all very low key, and I was kind of loud. And I hadn't done it on purpose, but that's how I turned up. And it was apparently, it exceeded the British sensibility for what is acceptable in that situation. And so I got commented on to the group.
Okay. You were just too loud and flamboyant for the people that were doing group PT?
Yeah, but sponsored by Nike is his way of saying that, like, I looked like a corporate shill.
Okay, who cares?
Yeah.
Who care what that limey bastard thinks?
Well, can you imagine that happening with Americans? Like, if you're in unit PT and somebody shows up and they're wearing a Nike shirt and Nike shorts and Nike shoes, would you comment on it?
No, they must just like the brand. Like, our threshold for who gives a crap is so much higher than that.
Yeah.
Like,
and also,
our whole society, everything about our existence in America is super loud, Ben.
Yeah,
I saw a guy.
But you wouldn't even look at me in that situation and think it was some. You might just go, "Hey, cool shoes. Are those new?" Like, but that's it.
I would never have said anything about your
Not
shoes. No.
Sponsored by Nike.
I might honestly, that is kind of clever. If I had thought of it at the time, I might have said it, but not to rib you, but just because it would be a funny comment. But all right, so I was driving home from work yesterday, and I drove past a 4-door, 8-foot bed, turbo diesel F-350 with 48-inch tires and a 10-foot lift or whatever, and a giant flag that was proclaiming the person's political.
The standard joke about someone like that is he must have a small private parts. It's compensating.
Right? Yeah, the overcompensating. But our whole society is that way. Everything we do, everything's loud colors, bright plumage. We're all just trying to peacock for everyone else.
But you can exceed what's considered reasonable, and people will say something about it, just like I just did.
Well, in Britain, I don't think there is a threshold for that in America.
Yeah, there is.
That's my hypothesis.
I think there's such a thing as too loud and too big of a truck. You just described it.
Not to that person, obviously. And this is the thing. Like, that's not...
But you're right. You would never, ever see a truck like that in the UK. Ever.
Yeah, and that truck, Ben, is not an outlier. That is one standard deviation from a normal car in America.
Yeah. All right. So everything's bigger and louder.
That's right.
Good job.
It's America.
Good job putting brackets on my Bad at English segment. All right, that brings us to our main segment. So last week I mentioned that we were going to discuss, I gave an example of a podcast that I'd listened to with Steven Leavitt from Freakonomics, who had interviewed Sal Kahn, the founder of Khan Academy, and some of his ideas and how they were revolutionizing education. And you said, it's about time we talk about education. So let's have a discussion on education.
How are we going to frame this conversation?
Yeah, so here's how we're going to frame it. The framework I want to set for this discussion is because currently we're under these restrictions because of the pandemic of COVID-19, we have shown, unfortunately, I think, that there were ideas out there waiting in the wings that perhaps were being resisted by the establishment. We can't learn from home. We can't learn on computers. We can't do that. And people might have defended their position in resistance to those new disruptive ideas by saying they won't work or it's not possible, those kinds of things. And just like with a lot of things in our society, the pandemic swept in and proved that we could. We could do all of those things and more.
Well, it took all of the baseline assumptions that were preventing experiments from happening and made them irrelevant. Like, whatever your feelings are, Mr. Senior Administrator at this school district, they are irrelevant because the reality is you have to figure out some alternate method.
You do not have the option of having the kids in the classroom, so now how are you going to solve the problem?
Yeah, exactly. So you can kick around and moan about it for as long as you want. You still have to get it done.
So here's what's about to happen. The vaccinations are starting to happen. I think, like a quarter of the population have had them now, and the restrictions are starting to relax. And if we're not careful, we might take back some good beneficial progress that we've had. So
education-wise?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that's how I think we should frame this. Now, there are things that I think are problematic in the education system before COVID was even something people knew about, before coronavirus was on everyone's tongue.
Yes. Let's talk about the problems with the historic model of education in America.
Okay, so first of all, the historic education system in America is very inertial. You know, Newton's law: things at rest tend to stay at rest; things at motion tend to stay in motion. And the way that they got how they were comes from a long, long time ago.
Yes, I think since Plato or Socrates' days, we've had this model of education where the person with the information stands in front of the people without it and dispenses it to them through oration and maybe with a chalkboard or slate-board. And there's just been iterations and versions of that ad nauseum till present day.
So there's the assumption that that's the best way to teach. And then we give you homework where you go home and you practice. But the traditional model of homework is either you're just doing something you've already shown successfully that you know how to do and there's not a lot of value in it, or you don't know how to do it, but now there's no instructor around to help you cover the gap and you don't learn anything new.
Now, Ben, I have some very little experience with this from a personal perspective from having gone through the U.S. education system. And I will say that the most valuable education that I got throughout my entire life was the education that I got in college. Not because of the information they dispensed to me. I hardly remember anything that I learned in college. But I had to learn things on my own. There was a lot of problems, like specifically as a computer science major. They didn't teach us, they taught us the lessons, but it was just tools. Like they would tell us, like, this is how you execute this kind of code, or this is how you can make these variables do these transformations. But then they would give us our assignments, and they don't tell us how to do it at all. There's like, they just say, you have all the tools, figure it out. And I remember there was multiple times where I was given the challenge of, you need to write this program. Like one that sticks out in my mind to this day is, you need to write the program Snake. That little game where you have a snake that goes and eats a bullet and it gets a little longer, right?
You're like, this problem's already been solved. Yeah, now you solve it.
Well, and here's the thing, is I solved it in a entirely unique way from any other person that was in my class. Like they all used one set of tools, and I thought of something completely out of the box and completely crazy that I still got a perfect score on the assignment because it worked. And so what was important to me about my education was I learned how to learn. I learned how to approach a problem, break it down, and solve it with the resources that I had available.
Are you suggesting that what was unintentional by the system you were in and that they weren't trying to teach you that?
Oh, no, they weren't trying to teach me that at all. This was just the only way that they knew how to. Because either
let's take that one step further. Would you say this happened in spite of the education system rather than because of it?
I think it was a happy byproduct of the specific education that I was receiving. Because there are other people that went to the same university, and even people that went to the same classes that did not learn this lesson that I did.
Because there are enlightened members of the education profession that very much believe that what you achieved there is the goal of the education system. It's not to fill your head with a bunch of facts for recitation. It's to teach you how to learn.
This is exactly what I'm leading up to. Is I learned how to go and find answers, and not just to parrot back what I've been told, and not just to spit back up the things that have been parroted to me. The problem is that's what the education system is for the first 12 years of it, even and beyond that, depending on what you're actually learning. The lessons that you learn are not how do I figure this out. It is how I retain this information long enough to get a passing score in this test. And I can demonstrate this because my wife is still currently working on her doctorate. And this week, there was posts in the online learning class for the doctoral program, the people getting the pinnacle of education, that were asking her, it's like, you're getting a great grade in this class. Can you please help me? I'm lost on a couple of things. Like, these are grown adults trying to get the highest level of education, and they're not being directly spoon-fed the information they need, and they're lost.
Yeah, and that's a good anecdote. Sorry, but it isn't necessarily indicative of a problem, because this isn't just a system. It isn't a system of systems. It isn't even really a system of systems. This is really disjointed. I mean, it could be as individual as a single teacher, or a group that you're learning with, or it could be the principal, or it could be the state, or it could be the nation. It could be any of those things, or none of them.
Yes, but the system as a whole, the way that it's built and the mechanics of it, I'm a big proponent of look at the system and look at the rules of the system. It rewards people not for innovation, but for retention. And the person with the best memory is going to be the person that is most rewarded in our current academic system. Okay,
I'm gonna press you a little bit, and I want you to be specific and say, what do you think the quote unquote system is that relates to the specific anecdote you just gave?
People are taught that they are going to be spoon-fed information, and that at some point they need to parrot it back. And the successful and correct parroting back of that information is marked as success in the academic community. Because from the time they're kindergartners to the time they graduate high school through college, they are going to go to a room where a person with information is going to speak that information and expect them to take notes on that information. And then a week later is going to ask them questions about that information and expect them to know it. The teacher that's at the front of that room is told to teach this curriculum. These are the subjects that you are going to teach. Maybe they have some selection in it, whatever, that's fine. But the state also comes down and says, yea, verily, if you want your funding for this education program, these are the things that you need to teach, and you're going to prove it by having the kids parrot back the information in this format, on this test, on these subjects.
Yes, I agree with some of what you just said, most of what you just said, but I want to try to answer my own question to show what I'm trying to ask you for. So I'm pretending I'm you for a second. Nicole is going to X university in the doctoral program to get Y degree. This program she's in has defined these list of objectives because those are what's required by the Board of Accreditation in order to get a doctorate degree from this accredited university that's nationally accredited. And that is the system that defines the objectives, and these are the criteria that are used to determine if she has met those objectives to show that she has satisfied the requirements to get that accredited degree from that university.
Yes, I agree with what you're saying. And what I'm telling you is that the system is incentivized to the model that I'm referring to give the information to the student, have them give it back to them, and mark that as a success.
So I've mentioned before that I have a master's degree in education, so I have vocabulary that surrounds this. And there's a concept.
Oh, man, I'm coming to a gunfight with a knife. Like, you're all educated on this. Like, I've read a couple of articles this week.
There's a concept that's used in developing objectives for an educational system called Bloom's Taxonomy. Bloom's Taxonomy is like this hierarchical pyramid of demonstration of learning objectives. And at the bottom of the pyramid is something called remember. It's the lowest level. It's the shallowest level. It's can I tell you something and you recite it back to me. That's not the only way to measure it. It's generally recognized as a very low level kind of understanding of something. Can you recite back facts?
Ben, that's every history test I've ever taken. Can you recite back the date that these things happened?
I don't think so. I believe that you've been in history classes where they've gone much deeper into Bloom's taxonomy. Let me show you a few more of the levels. The next level is understand. Can you take those facts and show that you understand what they mean? Then the next level is apply. Can you take that understanding and transpose it onto another situation that's similar? Then the next level is evaluate. Can you contextualize and determine the context and the analysis of what you've done and apply it in general? And then lastly, the top of Bloom's taxonomy is create. Can you take all these ideas and facts and things you've learned and understood and applied to analyze, evaluate it, and make something new?
Okay.
So the goal of an educational system, if I'm an educator and I'm writing objectives for a course, I will write a few remember objectives, but I will also have understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create objectives.
That is the academic goal of the education system. That is, in the perfect universe, what everybody says and what all the administrators point at is we are trying to get kids to the top of this pyramid. That's fine, and that's great, and that should be your goal. What I'm saying is that the reality, the real world that we live in, and the real processes that our kids go through keeps them down at levels 1, maybe 2.
Yes, and it's unfortunate. And when you're doing learning activities, not everything is going to be at the top of the pyramid. Some of the things are going to be at the bottom. So, the little thing that your wife has to do where she goes on and makes comments and stuff, yeah, that may be happening at the remember, understand level. But it's supposed to be provoking and pushing you up the pyramid towards applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating.
But how is it even possible to objectively measure somebody's higher levels of that hierarchy? Like, I would argue that
you do that. You create. So the example you gave of creating the snake program is a great example. That is not a remember task. That is not an understand task. That's an apply, analyze, evaluate, and create task. In fact, it was creating. You were taking all the concepts that you'd learned in class and you were accomplishing the objective in a completely new, unique way. The real failure of the education system is when you get students at the top of Bloom's taxonomy and you push them back down. And I've seen that happen. Like, let's say, for instance, you were taught an algorithm for executing a mathematical calculation, and you came up with your own algorithm that also got the same end result and was accurate and repeatable. And the teacher said, no, stop doing it that way. Do it this way.
Which has happened. Like, people have done that, and people do that. This is the thing, Ben. What you're talking about is that I understand it. My argument is that pushing somebody up to the higher levels of that pyramid is going to be an individual educational process. That is going to be a one-on-one with this unique relationship with this between this student and this teacher, or this student went to these set of classes where he learned these lessons. But the system, by and large, leaves behind a lot of people in those first 2 levels of the pyramid. That's what I'm saying.
I agree, and let's talk about how and why. So that's one problem. It's just that we have this system that was built in the past, the world's changed, and it needs to catch up.
Oh, let's throw out the whole agrarian summer vacation nonsense that we still do.
Okay, I love that. I think you and I have probably read the same book about this. I can't remember which one it was, but Malcolm Gladwell compares how Western societies have built this fundamental assumption for when and how long children should go to school based around crop rotation.
Yes, when the vast majority of the United States was just trying to scrape a living out of the earth, and those kids were needed during harvest time, so we can't be having school during these summer months.
Right, and now that that's no longer the case, we still have our whole education system built around that assumption and don't even think about why or what the effects of it are.
Yeah, which is ridiculous.
But if you're from an Eastern economy, then they have their education system built around year-round cultivation, and they cultivate children's minds year-round, and no one knows why.
Right, which then leads better into what I think the primary goal of primary level education, like grades, I'm going to say grades K through 6. I honestly believe that the primary purpose for those schools is government subsidized childcare.
And that's interesting.
These are some of the articles that I was reading about, because when the pandemic happened and when schools all got shut down and started offering, some of them flexed very quickly to online learning. Some of them took a lot longer.
Wait. So are you saying that people are so cynical about education that they don't think there's any actual value to it? They're just pretending to teach, but really all they're doing is providing free childcare?
Now, what I'm saying is that one of the primary responsibilities of primary education is to provide the childcare in order to keep the economy running. So without government subsidized childcare, for example, Ben, if I was unable to telework during this pandemic, what would I have done with my kids? Like, what would this
is a good question.
This pandemic disproportionately affected working mothers more than any other class in America because all of a sudden their childcare evaporated and they have to be at home with their kids full time. If they're in a job that can't telework, they're just SOL.
But if the schools were able to adapt and provide a teleworking-based education system, you'd be like, well, if the only problem we're trying to solve is whether or not children are being educated, problem solved. They're still being educated. And we'd be like, yeah, about that. We want them to be educated, and we want to not have to watch them.
Well, no. It's more, we want them to be educated, and I need to go to work.
Yeah.
Like even if your kids had like all the technology dropped on them the day it happened, if you were in a job where telework wasn't an option, if you're stocking shelves at a retail store, you've still got to go stock shelves at the retail store, and you've still got young kids at home. Who's going to watch them? This is the thing. The education system for younger kids, if they learn something honestly, I feel like that's a byproduct. The primary function is that they're out of the house, which frees up the parents to go do their jobs. This isn't the baby boomer days anymore, Ben. There are, I think, working parents, like both parents working, is more and more the norm these days than it is just one person being the breadwinner.
Yeah, it definitely caused a lot of people to just kind of have to rework their lives because they were based around the fundamental assumption that their children were going to be in school.
Well, and there's going to be, what are the long-term ramifications of this? Like, if there's two working parents, and whoever's got in a complete vacuum, without talking about the situation, the specifics, or sexism, or whatever, whoever's got the highest earning salary is probably going to be the person that keeps working. The other person's going to be the one that sucks it up and stays home and takes care of the kids. Just as an assumption, that's where we start from. Now, on the other side of that, pandemic is over, kids are back in school, everything's back to normal. How does the other parent took 2 years off of work, is 2 years behind her working peers? Like, how did they justify that to future employers? Everybody that had to pause their professional lives to take care of their kids is now farther behind in there. Like, they didn't just pause their careers, they lost ground.
I agree that this is a problem, but I feel like it's going to dilute our discussion if we go too far down this path.
Oh, no, we don't have to go any farther than that. All I'm saying is that childcare is a vital function that primary school provides.
Okay. I do want to take a tangent and establish an idea that's derived from Magic the Gathering. This is another one of those, like, something that you learn in Magic the Gathering and how it applies to life. One of the fundamental rules of Magic the Gathering is when you're playing a constructed format, there is the minimum deck size of 60 cards. That means when you sit down to play a match against an opponent, you have to present a 60-card deck. If you have less than that, it's illegal and you immediately lose. You can have more than that if you want. And the debate always comes up about, well, since there's no maximum limit, what is the benefit or lack thereof of going above the 60-card limit? And I'll get to how this applies to education in a minute. You're probably way ahead of me.
I was going to throw out, there's two things that exist in Magic right now that actively benefit you from having more than 60 cards in your starting deck. There's two cards that mention it specifically, but we don't have to go into that.
But those are corner cases and kind of rare exceptions. I know that you know that. Yeah. The thing is that you learn really quickly that of the 60 cards that you have in your deck, adding more dilutes the effectiveness and importance of the ones that you'd already defined. So you try to put together a 60-card deck that's the best possible strategy for accomplishing your objective of how to win the game. Now, to compare that to education, you have, as we've defined, however many months we go to school, 9 months out of the year, and we roughly have a 32-ish hour week that the children are in school, and that's your 60-card deck. And the thing we don't think about is whenever you come up with a bright idea of something new you want to add to the education system, you have a decision to make. And that is, do I add a 61st card, or what card am I going to take out in order to keep my deck at 60 cards?
Listen, parents, we would love to teach this enhanced art class, but something else has got to fall off the schedule first.
Yes, or we go more months out of the year, or more days out of the week, or more hours out of the day.
And there's no budget for any of that.
Right. We assume that those parts are not flexible. We're not going to go more months out of the year. We're not going to go more days out of the week. And we're not going to go more hours of the day. So 60 cards is it. If you want to put in another card, you got to take one out. And everyone has lots of bright ideas. And for some reason, we think it's a good idea to separate those two discussions. Let's talk about the good things we think we should do in education. And everyone can sit around and think of all the additional things we want to do that we aren't already doing. But you can't separate that from the discussion about, okay, if we're going to do this new thing, what are we going to stop doing that we're already doing?
This is a great idea. Which other idea that we've already implemented is it strictly better than? Like, can it not only replace a current idea, but also enhance it to a point where it's worth the cost of transitioning?
So I have an example that I love to bring up that always causes a fight.
Oh, I love fighting with you, Ben.
It won't cause a fight with you, but it does with people like my mother. If we are going to introduce and emphasize the importance of being able to communicate via computers, we need children to learn early and be better typists.
I completely agree. I actually I learned to type in the 6th grade, and I thought that was way too late. My son is in 3rd grade, and he takes we make him take extra typing classes regularly. And
I know you probably know this, but before I joined the Air Force, I was a typing teacher.
I don't think I did know that.
And I taught 6th grade typing, which in the state of Nevada was the mandated year that children learn typing. And I was always convinced that they should know it sooner. Now, as is with any standard population, they follow a standard distribution bell curve. And I would have kids that would come in and from whatever circumstances in their life were already really good at typing, and some that were really, really terrible of it. And most of them were kind of in the middle somewhere. And the biggest challenges I had to get them to overcome was just unlearning their bad habits and learning how to touch type. But I could take a group of kids in a year and turn them into, 20 to 30 words per minute touch typists. And ones that were already at 30, get them up to 50 or 60. And I'll still have some that just didn't force themselves to touch type and were still hunting peckers, and they'll never get above 20.
So did you actually teach, or did you just turn on, like what my typing teacher did, and just turn on Math Blasters or whatever typing program on the computers and then sit back and read a magazine the whole time?
I didn't have that. Well, I sort of did, but it wasn't comprehensive enough to really accomplish the objective. So there was a lot of instruction involved.
Okay.
And what I would do with my students is I would show them, they would come in, some of them were kind of cocky, so every class I would figure out in just a minute or two who the best typist in the class was. And they usually knew. They're like, I'm it. And I would challenge them to a test. And I would put up 2 screens with an online typing test. And I would sit down and touch type. And that student and I would really play it up and get the kids and get the pressure on so that they were guaranteed to lose because they were nervous and they'd screw up. And I'd blow their doors off. I typed like 72 words a minute. So I would completely destroy them and they would think they're so great. And then I'd be like, okay, good job. Everyone in here, you can get as fast as me before this year is over if you just let go of your old habits and follow what I'm about to teach you. And most of my students I saw do that.
Did you see how awesome it was when I blew that kid's doors off with my touch typing? You could be as good as me. Follow my easy 15-step program. Like, this is
I don't really have to sell that, though.
This is a ready-made late-night TV commercial, Ben.
Until we get to full voice, it's like Star Trek. We're like computer. We pick up the mouse and talk to it like Scotty on Star Trek 4. No,
hello, computer.
This is coming in our lifetime. Maybe this is just an interim problem, but kids already understand the value of being a fast typer. They get it. I didn't have to sell it to any kids. They weren't like, what are we doing this for? It's not like I'm never going to use math in my life. Every kid knows what you need to type for.
Well, but here, even if we get to, I'm sorry, I'm going to derail you for a second. Even if we get to the point where it's Tony Stark style, like Jarvis talking to the computer, he even calls it in the movies. That's a common language interface. There's a difference between the way we speak and the way that we write professionally. And I think typing is an excellent way to transition from one to the other.
I love that you brought that up because that's exactly the same format of the objections I get when I talk about the opportunity cost of increasing typing instruction. If you want to take a card out of your deck to make typing instruction more important, it needs to be cursive handwriting.
Oh, yeah. No, cursive is the first thing that needs to get dropped off the curriculum.
And when I bring that up,
write in cursive.
Well, okay, that's why I said we weren't going to argue. When I bring this up, people object. They think of they think of anecdotes, they think of stories, they come up with objections, and they tell you why cursive handwriting is so important for students to learn. And just like you and I both said, 6th grade is way too late. But if you want to do it sooner, you got to take something out of the deck. And you're not taking out English or history or science or mathematics to make room for typing earlier in students' instruction. It needs to be a like thing. And this is what you do with a magic deck. If I want to put a card in that's better than a card in my deck, I take out a card that does the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I want children to learn how to type in 1st or 2nd grade, I need to find time in 1st or 2nd grade doing the same kind of thing, and that is cursive handwriting.
I'm going to go ahead and propose to you, Ben, that kids already learn how to write, like in block print, which I write exclusively in block print because I think cursive is asinine. But I feel like learning to type is different. Like that is interacting and interfacing with a tool that is different than a piece of paper. Whereas learning cursive is learning the same thing, but fancy.
It's supposed to be faster too, but it's ridiculous.
There in no universe is cursive faster than writing. Well, at least not for me, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, you know what? You should challenge your students. Like, we're going to have a typing contest. I'm going to type, and you're going to write it in cursive, and we're going to see who can get it down faster.
But the students aren't the problem. It's people like the person I previously named that I don't want to keep repeating, that think that there's still some inherent value that makes it equal or better than typing.
I can't believe that we live in a universe where people still... This person must have been 80 years old. There is nobody on earth that can claim that cursive is more important than typing right now.
Okay, look. I'll do some research on educational objectives in states. Like I said, when I taught back in 2004 in the state of Nevada, cursive instruction started in 1st grade and typing instruction was in 6th grade.
Then 2004 was the dark ages, buddy. We were still using floppy disks back then.
Maybe. I'd be surprised if the curriculum had really changed all that much since then. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm wrong.
Honestly, if you were teaching, I would be willing to bet if you were typing against 6th graders today, they'd probably blow your doors off if they were allowed to type on their phones.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's talk about some of the ideas that came up in the discussion between Steve Leavitt and Sal Kahn.
I didn't listen to the podcast, so I'm not going to contribute much to that, but I can comment on them.
Well, that's interesting that you did some reading but didn't listen to it because it was only 40 minutes. But anyway, so Sal Kahn used the metaphor of one of the fundamental assumptions of our education system, and that is our grading system. And when you have a standard distribution of people, you're going to have people on a standard distribution of intelligence quotient. Like, not everyone's going to be brilliant. There's going to be some people that aren't. And we've recognized that. We used to be much more comfortable with it. Back in the 1700s, there was a quote I read today that they thought, only 20 to 30% of people were smart enough to be capable of learning to read and write. Now we start with the fundamental assumption that everyone is capable of being taught to learn and write, to write and read.
I mean, those are not hard skills. Yes, I believe everybody could learn to read.
But over the last 2 decades, our presidents have led initiatives in Congress that turn into national objectives and ways of distributing scarce funds surrounding these kinds of ideas. And under Bush, it was called No Child Left Behind. And under Obama, it was called Every Student Succeeds. And both of them are an idea that I'm going to express mathematically.
Well, this is the idea that everybody gets driven towards the middle. Like, because we're trying to everybody get to go as a group, then the people...
That's not the way they would expect it, but yes, that's what happens.
That's exactly what I have been the victim of that my whole life. Because, Ben, I don't know if I've mentioned this in the podcast. I'm usually very humble. I am an exceptional person. And I feel like I was
You have an above average IQ.
I do.
You were in gifted classes in high school and elementary.
Yes, but at the same time, like for my all the way up until high school, I was just having to sit there and be bored in class all the time. Be like, yeah, I get it. Like, it took me a long time. Like, I had to be sat down and explained to that, yes, we know that you're bored and we know that you get it, but some people don't get it in the first 5 minutes. And like that concept blew my mind.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems with these fundamental assumptions. So if you have a standard distribution of individuals in a bell curve and you say, we're not going to leave any child behind or every student's going to succeed, right now, whatever you can either set your criteria for failure so low that you already have met your objective, or you can take let's say it's just slightly below center of what your criteria for success are, the amount of effort needed to take that low end of the distribution curve and move them above the line is so high that you have to divert resources from elsewhere on your curve in order to distort your standard distribution so that it doesn't fall below a certain line. You have to take resources away from the top. And that's what you're describing. You take resources away from art and from PE and from gifted and talented education. And all of a sudden, everyone's mediocre.
Yeah, because like you're talking about, the effort that it takes to make sure that we meet these criteria so we get the government funding. So the teacher, the fund sources, the curriculum, the entire system is built to take basically the low end of this curve and make sure that they get to a passing level, while the upper ends of the curve are left to languish. Like maybe they get recognized by a teacher that, like, and this is the one thing that people always say teachers are heroes. And I, for the most part, I agree they have a very difficult job. But the handful of individuals that take the time to really appreciate their students and take their own time to really facilitate the learning of individuals and maybe recognize that the gifted kid sitting in the back of the room is bored and give him a challenge or make them go farther than they would on their own otherwise. Those are the real heroes, the people that are putting, because it's not coming from the system. It's coming from one person.
The reason they're heroes is because there's no real incentive for them to do that.
Exactly. Thank you. That's a much more succinct way of saying what I was trying to say.
Yeah. So that's a problem that we can solve with technology and these changes that we're talking about. So the way Sal Kahn expressed it is in the metaphor of building a house. He says, let's imagine for a minute we're building a house and we're building the foundation. Under a traditional education model, we are pressing and we're doing it based on a schedule. So let's say we've set aside 2 weeks to build the foundation and we get 80% complete. That's a B. Now we need to move on and build the first story of the house.
But there's only 80% of the foundation that's there. Yeah, this is a concept that I've heard before. It's like, yeah, C's are passing. So if you're a C student all through high school, then 9th grade, you only got 70% of what you were supposed to learn. And then in 10th grade, you only got 70% of that, which you're already lacking. So by the time you get to 11th grade, you've only got like half of the stuff that you're supposed to know.
Yes, and you've built on a weak foundation and the whole thing can collapse.
Yes.
Yeah, you can get a C in high school mathematics, but you know, if you miss some fundamental concepts and you've been lacking them all along, the amount of stuff you cannot do and don't understand gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
If you struggle through algebra, geometry is going to blow your doors off.
Right. Exactly. It's going to be a big problem.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things he says you can question if you really change the education model altogether, and instead of it being like that where we're trying to keep everyone together and on a schedule and meet these hurdles at the exact same time every year with the same age group of students. Instead, we have a mastery-based model. Like if you're studying martial arts, you stay at the belt that you're at until you've mastered that level, and you don't advance until you've mastered it, and then you move on.
Yes.
Now, a mastery-based model requires a lot of individual adjustment, and maybe in the past that just wasn't possible.
When you have one teacher standing in the front of a room of 30 kids, she can't tailor the curriculum to each individual based on their progress.
Right. So you target right in the middle and you try to keep everyone moving ahead as best you can.
And you just try to stay sober through the day.
Right. But now we're starting to have resources available to us, technology that can individually tailor education and allow students to self-pace their learning. And we can reverse the Socratic method. And instead of doing lectures at school and homework at home, we can do it the other way around. You can get a self-paced lecture at home and come to school and discover and do practice together and learn new things.
There was a school in New York that did this experiment. I read this article like a while back, so this is not something that happened during COVID. But they took a handful of elementary level classes and they completely transformed them with technology. Instead of the teacher lecturing every day, the kids would come in and they'd have different stations. They had like a reading station and like a math station. And they would be assessed by different computer programs that were helping them facilitate learn. Like they'd get little videos and everything, the stuff that is standard now for online learning. And then the computer would constantly assess what the level of the students were. And if they needed some more time, then it would tell the teacher, like, hey, this person is at this level. He needs to spend a little more time on these specific subjects. And they would get specific tailored attention for the subjects that they were struggling with. Other students that excelled, they would blow past it and they would continue to progress in their education. And sometimes the teacher would task some of the exceptional students to help some of the ones that were falling behind. And so now it turns into a community and a group thing. And we're all doing this together and pulling ourselves forward.
Right. And I don't think you'll find any self-respecting teacher that doesn't say that's a good example. But the key ingredient in all of that is the technology that facilitates and provides the teacher that information so that they can make those adjustments. Because if you've got a class full of students and they're writing on worksheets in a traditional, environment, you can't do that.
Yeah, this is when we went and got our COVID packages from the schools. That's what we were handed. We were handed like an old
pile
iPad,
of worksheets,
and an old Chromebook, and a giant pile of photocopied like worksheets that the school had bought years ago, and they're just still making copies of the same thing. Yeah. It's like this is wonderful. It teaches my child nothing.
Yeah, and there's another problem, and that is that in all of this, when they set these political-based objectives of no child left behind and every student succeeds and Common Core and that kind of thing, they're defining these political objectives, but ultimately behind it all is just the distribution of money. Like, who's going to get the money? And when it becomes like that, there's a term that we assign to it, and that is high stakes.
Yeah, this is why we get all the examples in like the Freakonomics books where teachers are incentivized to cheat on the standardized tests because it drives the funding sources.
Exactly. Or it imperils the individual instructor's security of employment.
There are examples of teachers telling specific students, why don't you take a sick day on Thursday when they know that one of these surprise tests are coming or something like that.
Or, hey, gifted student, you're getting in the way of me teaching to this test and you're making a nuisance out of yourself. Get out of here. I know you'll be fine.
I was told that several times in elementary school.
Yeah, exactly. And those are both terrible examples at the bottom and top end of the thing, where you're either completely disregarding a student you should be adapting for on either end of the bell curve because you've got to get everybody to the middle.
I got in an actual fight with my physics teacher in high school because of the equations. Like, okay, this only works if you ignore this, this, and this. And I was like, what are we even learning in here? And we got in like this huge argument. And I love it. That's the classic thing in physics class. All right, we're just going to ignore friction. That is exactly what I was mad about. Like, you can't just ignore friction. That is physics.
Right.
It's like,
friction is ever present.
So we're going to do this math to show this, to make an example of this thing, but it only works in a perfect vacuum with no friction and if the cow is a perfect sphere. What? This makes no sense.
That's him saying that you guys, either he's not smart enough to understand it or you guys aren't smart enough to do the complex math required to actually calculate it in real life.
Oh, and this is something all right, here's another thing. Let's talk about this in education for a second. Why don't we? In high school and elementary school, you are taught this. This is the truth. Yea, verily. This is what you need to know. Write this on the test and you will pass. And then you get to college and every subject across the board, it's like, yeah, that's technically correct, but not at all correct. Kind of correct. And like, here's all the real information.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really have that experience so much. The one thing I did have is this assumption that okay, so in the podcast, Sal Kahn mentioned something I hadn't heard of before, so I went and looked it up. He said back in the 1890s, there was this meeting of the Committee of 10 of the NEA. So I looked it up, and in 1892, there were 10 people that got together and decided what would constitute high school graduation, and it remained virtually unchanged for 118 years.
That's terrifying. That is genuinely terrifying.
And many of the ideas that are at the heart of our current system date back to that meeting of educators. Ugh. Just the idea of like what you should learn and how many years you should have it and what constitutes a high school graduation goes back to 1892.
Oh.
Now, 118 years later, we're still trying to solve the problem. Sorry, I said 118 is actually 129 from then. But in 2010, the United States government was trying to grapple with this and defining what's called Common Core. Now, I'm going to take a detour and talk about federalism for a minute.
Oh, Ben, we are running long here if we're just now starting to talk about federalism.
Okay, so in the founding of the United States of America, we decided that it was of great value to define a united set of states that work together but also had individual identity. And I think the important thing that federalism gives us is the ability to remain flexible to individuals' needs or regional needs or community-based needs. And I think it's important that we don't have a single national mandatory system that defines everything about our education system. We still are allowed to vote locally and make decisions locally on a state basis and an even smaller basis for what is in and why and what we do in our education system.
Okay.
Do you disagree with that?
I disagree with that when we start talking about the inequity that comes with geographical distribution, because this goes back to COVID again. Like, I live in a place where this is a general middle-class neighborhood. And so when the kids had to all go virtual, the school's just like, okay, everybody's going to get a Chromebook. And that wasn't a problem. But if we start talking about, downtown LA or something where the internet is not an assumption, it is a luxury that maybe kids have it, maybe they don't. Does this, very low-end high school, can they even afford the technology to go online? That's when it starts to become a problem with that not having a federal education system.
So I like this example you gave, and I think it illustrates why this is a problem, because if you say, all right, now we're going to associate your ability to get money, not based on the lowest people get more money, but based on if you don't meet these certain minimum standards, we aren't going to give you money, because how else do you do it? Then schools that are already poor, disadvantaged, and low just get worse. Yeah,
they just continue to struggle not because of any teachers are lacking, not because there's not a desire to learn, but because the system decided to penalize for the wrong things.
Yeah, and there's always unintended consequences. These are just bad ideas expressed as catchy slogans. No child left behind sounds so nice. Every student succeeds. Of course I agree with that. Why would I hate nuclear surety?
That's a straw man, Ben. Stop bringing up logical fallacies in our education discussion.
But what aren't we learning that we should be? What methods and innovations have come around in the last 20 years that we could leverage to improve? And what is standing in the way of us doing that?
So this is why, for me personally, homeschooling is such an attractive prospect. But alternatively, I don't have the time for that. I have a professional career. I can't custom tailor a curriculum for my kids to go learn and explore and do things. So I have to rely on the school to provide them the fundamentals. And this is the key, I think, at least for my personal experience. I am not trusting the school as far as I can throw it. I'm expecting them to get my kids the absolute basics, and then they're going to learn a lot more from their parents than they are from their teachers.
I'm glad I like the way you approach education in your home and how much interaction you feel like you have there.
Today at lunch, we were eating our lunch at Saturday, and I turned on a YouTube video that they like, and it's this guy that does random mechanical things with Legos, and they like it because it's Legos, and I like it because
I've seen it. He'll say how fast can we get this thing to spin with gear ratios?
Yes, and he goes through all the math, and I did this gear is this big, this gear is this big, and I can pause it and I can explain to my son, this is the math that he is doing to figure out how to make this thing turn this specific speed. And he learns a little something about engineering, a little something about math, and it's in a fun way that he likes.
Every one of these little gear reductions is just a math problem, multiplication.
Yeah, exactly. And so is he learning anything specific? No. Am I going to test him specifically in the video? No. But it puts that foundation in his brain. Maybe something clicks down the line, or maybe it makes him a little more interested in it so he can explore it on his own. I don't know.
So Sal Kahn gave a great example in the interview with Mike Leavitt, where he said, I used to be an analyst at a venture capital firm. And he says, I went to one of a company that we were thinking about funding. And I mentioned to the CFO what their profit was per unit costs. And he said he was shocked, and he stopped me. He's like, how did you know that? He's like, well, you publish how many units you sell in a year, and I just looked at your financial statement and divided and got the answer. He's like, it's just 8th grade math. But we don't think that we can apply those things that we learn in the real world, but of course you can.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of accounting. I'm still studying for the CPA exam, and I'm so disillusioned by financing.
Yeah, but what are you learning? Are you learning 8th grade math, or are you learning government bureaucracy?
Both. I'm learning both. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, But
all right.
The entire financial system in America is built on extractions and guys sitting around a table like drinking beers. It's like, hey, so I bought this truck, yeah? I should be able to write that off on my taxes. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, but I'm also going to have the truck next year, so I should be able to write it off next year, too. Well, I guess that makes sense, but you shouldn't be able to write the whole thing off both times. Well, let's spread it out over time. Like, every single thing that exists in the financial industry in America is some abstraction of simple math until it gets so convoluted and complicated that it turns into a completely abstract, nonsensical thing that has no relation to reality whatsoever. Sorry, I'm just ranting because I'm upset because I'm studying for the CPA exam, and it's really hard.
Yeah, well, it is tax season. Sorry.
Oh, I'm still working 6 days a week, man.
Well, I think we have a lot of remnants that exist just because of inertia in the education system. And it causes things that I think are unfair or disequitable or ineffective. And I think it's important for us to question those. But I also think it's important for us not to lose ground right now. While we have proven that there are things that we can do with technology that allow more individualized instruction, more self-paced learning, more allowing better assessment of children's capabilities and where they're at, and better mastery-based learning instead of just keeping them on a schedule. And I think that we need to speak up and do what we can to make sure that we don't lose these improvements that we made to the system, miss this chance to break the inertia.
There's the optimistic version. Here's the pessimistic version.
Go.
As soon as this is over and all the kids can go back to school, I think the entire education system from the top to the bottom is going to breathe a collective sigh of relief, and they're going to go right back into their safe zone, into their comfort spot, and just do exactly what they've been doing this whole time forever.
I hope you're wrong.
I hope I'm wrong too. But it doesn't change the fact that when we're talking about education, it's not just about the system. Like, I don't trust the system. Again, I said that, to educate my son. Everything my kid needs to know, like, most of it is not going to come from school. A lot of it is going to come from... Me and Nicole used to make this joke that we're going to homeschool our kids every other year. And then the years that they go to school, we're going to tell them, listen, you're already going to know everything in the class. What you need to learn is how to talk to the other kids, because we cannot teach you that. I can't teach my son how to make friends. I can't teach my son how to integrate himself with a group of people. That's something that he's just going to have to learn on his own. And while I agree with you that this technology in education is a great thing and will custom tailor the specific lessons that they have to learn, there is also the social development aspect that you just can't get at home, or you can't get over Zoom, or you can't get on the computer in general.
Yeah, and I think that there's more to it than just learning to socialize. I think that, in the professional world now, we work as part of a team and we accomplish things as a team. We're not individuals. You don't get an individual grade on anything you do in the professional world. And I think that there's that's an important aspect of it too, that we aren't good at teaching and measuring in the educational world.
I hate teams. I've always loathed team projects.
Josh, you're part of a team.
I'm not, no, yeah, but I'm part of I'm a specialized, compartmentalized version of my team where I just get to sit in my office and do my work.
So there was something we said today. Did you have any final thoughts on education before we close?
There's a lot of room for innovation in education, but like you said, the problems that we have to overcome is bureaucracy, inertia, and just the old hats that think cursive is something that's worth teaching.
Or whatever else it is that they want to teach.
And unless you take a very incredibly active role in your local government, like, you're not going to make any impactful changes on your students' education. Like, so if you are concerned about your kids' education, the point that you're just going to have to supplement it yourself. Find ways to interact with them in their off time and your off time, and just give them all the extra lessons that you think they need.
Well, I think then I should put a plug in for Khan Academy. If you are looking to disrupt and self-supplement with yourself or with your children, go check out Khan Academy. It's excellent. They've got over 8,000 videos in 30 different languages where you can, and it's all free. And schools are starting to leverage it. And this is the kind of thing that the internet can do to disrupt things. Just take something cool and make it available for free. One last example is that the college admissions are based on a college entrance examination, such as the SAT. And for a long time, the National College Board has known but not been able to do anything about the fact that this highly favors rich people because they can acquire tutoring, testing, practice, things such as Kaplan or other things where they can prepare for the exam, and people with more resources tend to do better on the college entrance examination. But Khan Academy has produced something that in many ways has shown it to be more effective at preparing students to take the SIT, and they've made it available for free. And so they've democratized it and made it better for people at the low end. And that's exactly an example of what these disruptive technologies can do to improve education.
Woo! Go technology.
So I mentioned something today that I think we should do for next time. I mentioned in passing the movie Minority Report. It's probably in my top 5 all-time favorite films. I love that movie. And you and I did a treatment where we reviewed, reminisced on, analyzed, and gave a Magic the Gathering magic system rating to the movie Incredibles. And I'd like to do that same type of thing with Minority Report. You up for it?
You want me to watch an excellent Tom Cruise movie and like just nitpick every little detail?
Yes.
I don't know, Ben. That doesn't seem like it fits with my personality at all.
All right. So for episode 45 of Bad at Magic, we'll be reviewing and discussing the Minority Report. So if you're looking for some homework, go watch that excellent movie.
Oh, Ben, you are opening you're just handing me on a silver platter the reason to discuss all the different versions of fictional time travel.
Oh, it's going to be great.
Oh, I'm going to love that.
Okay. Yeah, let's close it up.
Well, thanks for listening to the Bad at Magic podcast with your hosts, Ben and Josh. If you like what we do, one of the best ways that you can support us is to take out your phone right now and on whatever podcast player that you're on, give us a review. Put in a review, say something nice about us, and submit it. That really helps with our visibility, and that'll really help get the word out about our podcast.
And if you want to interact with us in the discussion that we're doing every episode, we put on our subreddit, we put up a discussion thread and a few other threads where you can become part of the discussion, interact. Every episode on our Facebook page, I put up a photo album with things that we've talked about and links. And there's lots of ways for you to engage and get in touch with the podcast. And recently, as I mentioned in last episode, I created a brand new Bad at Magic Challenge coin, which is available. And if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/badatmagic and become a supporter of the podcast, and I will send you your very own Bad at Magic challenge coin. Josh, did you get yours this week?
I did get mine. They are outstanding. And I want to tell everybody, there is a limited supply of these things. If you want one, you should get it now.